Well, good afternoon, everyone. By my clock, it is 1 p.m. and I want us to get started on time because we have a fun-filled couple of hours to spend with you. I just want to, for those of you who don't know me, just introduce myself. My name is Christy Snuggs. I'm the Deputy Director with the Division of Child Development and Early Education. And we want to welcome you to our North Carolina Early Learning Regional Meeting around the topics of transitions. We know that many of you have been engaged in regional meetings over the last several years that were sponsored through ESSA work and also through some funding that we had through the Head Start Collaboration Office. And we are so excited that many of you have chosen to reconvene some of those teams and bring them today, or maybe some of you weren't engaged, or if you were, you haven't been working on any of those discussions around transitions recently. Well, we hope to re-energize that communication and collaboration in your local communities by modeling for you what we're doing at the state level. And so on this slide, which is one of my most favorite slides, you will see a list of partners that have combined their level of expertise and also their time and commitment to pull these virtual regional meetings together. And we have hosted 7 over the last several weeks, and today is number 8. This is our last one, and we are thrilled that you guys are with us because, as people always say, we save the best for last. So thank you all for being with us today. I am very fortunate to have with me today my co-host, Ms. Carla Garrett, and I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Christy. It is indeed a pleasure to have you and all the others as such great partners. So I am Carla Garrett, and I am the Early Childhood Program Specialist at the Serve Center at UNCG. So thank you, as Christy said, for joining us. A big welcome to the Western region. And we're excited to be here with you this afternoon. Along with the partners that are listed on the screen, we also have a number of presenters that we are fortunate to have with us this afternoon sharing their expertise. So I'm going to call on each of them to introduce him or herself. So first, we will go with Dan.
Hi there, this is Dan Tatro. I'm with the Department of Public Instruction's Office of Early Learning, and I serve as the project manager for the division.
Thank you so much, Dan. And now John.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is, my name is John Pruitt. I work with Education Council based in Washington, D.C. We're a mission-based education consulting firm that combines experience in policy, strategy, law, and advocacy to drive improvements in the education systems across the United States. Previously from North Carolina, and worked with Dan in the Office of Early Learning, so, and with Carla, and with a lot of people on this call. So happy to be with you.
We are so fortunate and excited to have John's expertise back with us in North Carolina. So thank you again, John, for joining us. In addition to John from Education Council, his colleague Ellie Cash will be with us, and she'll be joining around 1:30 or so. So you'll get to meet her very soon. And we also want to call on Muffy for an introduction.
Sorry, y'all. My name is Muffy Grant. I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation, and I'm thrilled to be with y'all today. This is our final meeting, and we're finishing out in the West. So I kind of think like sunward ho, here we go. Very excited to be with you.
Thank you so much, Muffy. So again, thanks to all. We're excited about the afternoon, and without further ado, we're going to get us started. So back to Christy.
Thanks, Carla. And John, I'm hurt. You worked with me too. I was just in a different agency with the community college system.
You know what? I feel bad that I didn't mention your name, but I did say a lot of people on this call. Too many to mention.
John and I started in this work together just a couple of years ago, John, right? We were both newcomers to the field, I think, during that time. But we are so glad to have you with us today. Real quickly, just to go over the agenda and there's been a copy dropped in the chat for you. I want to thank Tennille and many of our people behind the scenes, our technology crew and others that will be helping to facilitate some of our breakout sessions. Thank you all for being on the call with us today as well. So we're going to kick everything off here in a few minutes with a success story from a parent's perspective. I think it's always great to hear a parent who has actually gone through transition and how that was advantageous and beneficial, or maybe not so beneficial for her. So we'll be hearing from a parent here in a few minutes. And then we're going to spend some time today really hoping to provide a little bit of time for you to do some relationship building. But of course, that is something that we're going to ask you to continue to work on as you go back and continue discussions and meetings in your local communities. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of a transition pilot. Many of you, I've noticed some of the names on the call have been participants in this pilot, but others may have been or may have heard about it that haven't really kept up with where we are. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to look at transition requirements based on funding sources and where some of the legislation in North Carolina might land and how that creates some opportunities for us to do some new and exciting things. Education Council and our friend John and Ellie, they're going to talk to us about some data about where our children are. Some of those that we typically would anticipate going to public schools in kindergarten, that maybe that's not the same anymore since the pandemic. So we're going to talk about that. And then one of the highlights for today's meeting is we're going to have some experts who have done transition for a long time in their communities. They're going to share the good, the bad, and the ugly about transition. And then we're going to give you some time to do some breakout discussions. Again, we wish we had more time in a 2-hour meeting to give you more breakout time, but we're going to give you at least some start up time for you to begin those conversations. And then we'll talk about next steps and finish up for today. Next slide. A couple of the meeting goals to keep in mind as we're going through the agenda is we want you to continue to build cross-sector relationships that really support local collaboration. We hope that by the end of our time together, you'll understand opportunities and requirements in relation to ESSA and other state programs and legislation. We hope that you'll use some of these opportunities to support coordinated early learning systems at the local level. We're going to try to model for you a lot of the work we've done at the state level and hope that that will be a reflection of what we would like for you to do at the local level, or hopefully you can share some insight of what you're already doing that we can learn from. We want you to really understand the why behind local coordination and collaboration and its critical importance to optimal success in transitions and many, many other things. And then we hope that you'll recognize some new opportunities as you develop a community transition plan. So I'm going to turn it back over to Carla to talk a little bit more about some of the norms for our meeting.
Thank you so much, Christy. And as Christy went through the goals, many of you recognize some of those goals from the past as you participated in this work before. And we're excited you're with us again to really focus on this work and think about what it looks like. And we ask you to join with your team, and many of you were able to do that. So we are super excited about that. And speaking of teams, as Christy said, we're going to get through what we're doing and sharing so we can get to the parts where you have the opportunity to meet with your teams in 2 different breakout sessions. So we know you've always valued that opportunity in the past and that intentional time to talk together. So we're excited about both of those opportunities. So when you get into your groups, just to think about some norms of being honest, kind, and assuming good intent. When having those conversations about what's going on at the local level, listening to understand, not just to respond, sharing the air with other folks to before me. So just really thinking about giving others the opportunity to have some conversation in that time together, making sure you're on mute to minimize background noise. And we would absolutely love it if you could use your video, because we're sorry we can't be together face to face, but we would love to be present with you and see you on the screen. I will say one benefit of having these meetings virtually is we have been able to include so many people, and you've been able to include all of your partners that you wanted to participate. So that part has been really amazing to be able to have so many team members at the table. So thank you for that. Even though we couldn't meet face to face, there are some positives with the virtual piece. We also wanted to pause and just say thank you for all the work that you've done, particularly during the pandemic. It's been such a challenging time. And we know that, I think many of us had this conversation and said, this year is going to be better. We're going to be back to normal. It's going to be so much better. And then we found out that this year was even more challenging than ever. So we just want to say thank you for all the work that you've done to include children, to have them in the classrooms face-to-face, in the programs, participating and receiving services. So you're the ones that are on the ground doing this work, and we just want to say thank you so much, and we appreciate all that you do, and that you were willing to take 2 hours out of your day to really be present and focus with us on the transition piece. So thank you again. All right, so we mentioned the why and the goals, but just to kind of reiterate that we are here because there are a number of requirements that pertain to transition. Along with that, there are a number of opportunities. So when we think about the B3 continuum, there are so many places where we can work together and partner, where we can work to not duplicate efforts or work in our silos and work smarter in terms of instead of not harder. So as we were thinking about this, we really wanted to emphasize that. And Christy came up with a great acronym, which you'll see on the screen, and is the ROAR. So I'm going to turn it over to her to tell you more about that.
So as Carla talked about the requirements and the opportunities, we want you to commit to action after meeting with us today and to continue to build those relationships. And so if you do that, we feel like you will be the king of your community and be able to roar. And so as a longtime educator myself, I always like for people to be able to have takeaways from a class or a training that I provide. So if you don't remember anything else, remember that we are here to roar and really help our families and children across the state. Next slide. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce now my friend that I feel like she's been with us throughout our regional meetings, but a parent, Miss Connie Coulter, who is going to share very briefly about her experience with her own child who transitioned from an NC pre-K program to a kindergarten program. And Connie, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Connie Coulter. I am a single mother of 5. Once again, I did not choose that type of lifestyle for me, but that's what my cards were dealt, and that's what I was left with. I have served on the Policy Council for the Early Head Start. I'm currently the chairperson for Ray Warren and the vice chair for the entire Policy Council for Guilford County. A little bit about me, I do have 5 children. Their ages range from 12, 11, 7, 4, and 2. And luckily, we was able to move here in Greensboro. So I do live in Guilford County. I am a full-time student as well as a full-time mother. And I currently have a 4.0 GPA, and I'm considered the top 5% of my class. So that's just a little bit about me. So now I'm going to talk about what you guys wanted me to talk about. And so my son, Zachariah, he is currently now in 1st grade, and he would not have made it this far without the support from his pre-K teachers. I'm a hands-on parent, and I encourage everybody that either bring their children to the Head Start Center that I am a part of. I encourage them to get involved. And the reason I do that is, 1, you need to know who your child is around. 2, you need to know, okay, if there's something that your child needs to focus on a little bit better to make their success story from the pre-K program into kindergarten a little bit more easier. And so I built a relationship for my child with his teachers. This was done prior to him starting NC pre-K, and this was a meeting that they had at the center, which he went to Hayes Taylor. I'm so sorry. Did you guys hear anything I was saying? Okay. For some reason, I'm not able to hear you, but I'm going to keep going. Okay.
Can you hear me
There.
now? Okay. We just
Yeah.
missed your last sentence. That's all. So just pick up there.
Okay. So what I was saying was create an environment where the parent feels that they can talk to the pre-K teacher. The environment that I had was amazing. My son went to Hayes Taylor for his NC pre-K program, and the teachers there, they were phenomenal. Before he went into pre-K, they had a meeting where he was able to meet the teachers, you know, walk inside the classroom, see a couple of his friends. This was prior to COVID happening. He was able to see a couple of his friends and stuff like that, so he would know, okay, well, this is going to be the new place. This is something that I think most schools should do now because of COVID. I feel like if you know what school that child is going to, if they can meet some of the teachers and let them know, hey, you know, this might be your kindergarten teacher, that would be very beneficial to the family and that child. So when they do go on to kindergarten, it's not, okay, I had never seen this lady, so now I'm having anxiety. I was very lucky because something that Guilford County does is they allow you to select the school that your child goes to. And so the NC pre-K teachers, they helped me to find a school that had a very good speech pathologist. And because my son has a condition called microtia with atresia, he was able to get into Montaloo Technology, and there, that school has been phenomenal. And so had I not been able to spend time with his teachers, I would not have known about the different schools that were available for my child. So if you are a NC pre-K teacher, I suggest that you build a relationship with the families and let them know that there's other options out there. Also, create a book for that child. So when that child leaves your classroom and goes on to the next classroom, this is something that the next teacher that your child will have in kindergarten will be able to use as a support guide to help them with your child when they run into issues such as, okay, how does this child like to learn? Okay, am I going too fast for this child? With my son, he has to sit in front of the classroom so he can pay attention because he has a condition where he can't hear all the way. The school never made me feel like I was nosy. I'm a hands-on parent, so whatever my kids are involved in, I am either volunteering or trying to get onto the committee. Transitioning from NC pre-K to kindergarten is really a big deal. And I want to encourage all of you to create the space, create the environment so the family knows that you are there to support them, because it's not just a change for this child, it's also a change for you guys as well. And you want your child to succeed. A child that has a good start in their education, whether it's through NC pre-K or it's through a home-based center, I feel that they will be successful in life because they have this support group standing behind them 100%. That is my time for today. Hopefully I shared something with you guys that you guys can use to help these other families out here. And when it's time for you to have your transition, hopefully this will work for you. I look forward to hopefully seeing you guys again, if ever in the future. Thank you for this time, and I hope everybody has an amazing day.
Thank you so much, Connie. Thanks so much for sharing your story and being with us over these last several weeks and being reminding us of the reason of why we do this is to support children like yours and families. So thank you so much for being with us. All right, so let's jump in. 2 hours is a long time. We've got a lot of information to share, but we need your help. We would like for you to, in your chat box, to type a word that comes to your mind when you think of transition. So let's get some interaction going. Change, partnership, a lot of change, movement, growth, adjustments, collaboration, family-centered, new experiences, And please keep adding those in. Every single one of those, opening a new door, all of those are what is happening in transitions. It's an opportunity to do something new and exciting. It's an opportunity to share and collaborate and work together. But it's also a change. And sometimes change can lead itself to feelings. So I'm going to turn it over to Carla to lead us through another icebreaker activity.
Thank you so much, Christy. As she said, we really want to keep you engaged throughout the afternoon. This is one way before we get to our breakout groups. So a second question for you to think about is, what did you feel when you started school? Christy and I talked about this. We had to really think back to when that time was when we started school, and recognizing that there are all kinds of feelings. For me, it was a positive experience. I had an older sister who always had me play in school, and I had a school bus that turned into my driveway. It stopped at the front door to pick me up, and Miss Jenny Perry welcomed me on the bus. And so it was an exciting opportunity for me to go to big school, but again, recognizing all kinds of feelings. So if you could take a minute and just type into the chat box how you felt when you started school. Oh, scared to ride the bus with the older kids. Excited, but a Little Mermaid book bag was really helpful in terms of starting to play and focusing on art. So let's see, cool, it's scared, nervous, felt so little compared to the big kids, excited, hanging out with friends. So that social part was a huge piece. Ready, Kim told her mom, I will see you later. So time to go, right? And excited. So you guys can keep typing if you have other thoughts, but just thank you for thinking through that. I think it's important for us to get back in that space and really think about this transition piece as we move forward in the afternoon. So thank you again. We're going to move forward, and now I'm going to turn it back over to Christy.
So I mentioned at the beginning and in the introduction that we were going to talk about the history of a transition pilot that started way back in 2016. This was the first assignment I was given as I came into this role, that Christy, you need to make sure we're moving forward on transitions. And it has become one of my favorite things to work on because of such great partners with DPI and many others. So I am going to turn this over to my good friend and colleague, Dan Tetro, to talk to us about where we have been and where we are now in our transition pilot. Dan?
Thank you, Christy. Okay, so yeah, let me talk just a little bit about the history here. So as you mentioned, back in 2016, in the budget bill, the 2016-17 budget bill, Senate Bill 740 was adopted by the full Senate at the request of a special legislative oversight committee on early education. And that bill directed the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Public Instruction, and then any other interested agencies to work together to develop and implement a statewide vision for early education. As part of that work, the bill directs the departments to devise a way for preschool teachers to prepare a preschool to kindergarten transition plan for all children enrolled in the NC Pre-K program that documents their strengths and their needs. During the same session, the 2016 legislative session, Session Law 2016-94 was passed, and in that law, DCDEE, in consultation with DPI, was charged with developing a unified vision for transitioning children from pre-K into kindergarten. And it was to include methods to standardize quantifiable student transition information and recommendations, as well as recommendations for sharing that data between pre-K teachers and the kindergarten teachers that the children would transition to, or the elementary school, as well as sharing that with families and parents or guardians of children prior to the transition to kindergarten. So we got started in 2018, a cross-agency committee. We began meeting prior to that, but in 2018, we developed some selection criteria to identify some initial counties to work with. We approached 3 counties who agreed to partner with us in the pilot. Those were Davidson, Iredell, and Craven. During that first year, we asked pre-K teachers to record information about children's development in their classrooms. And these included teachers from one private childcare setting, NC pre-K classroom, and one public school NC pre-K classroom. We asked the teachers, the pre-K teachers, to also share that information with the children's families, and then to ask the families if they could carry that information to the school and share it with their child's kindergarten teacher as they transitioned the following year. We also provided pre-K teachers with some all about me documents so that families could provide some additional information about their family and their child. And then we asked them to bring that along with the child development information with them as the child transitioned to kindergarten and share that with their kindergarten teachers. We then asked the pilot communities, so the teams that came together in those communities, to collaborate and create local transition plans with really a focus on how that child information would be shared between pre-K and families and kindergarten teachers, and provided support to those programs through the NC Early Learning Network at Frank Porter Graham. That spring and summer, we also collected information from stakeholders about transition practices, all the different types of transition practices that were already being provided across the state. We also reviewed a statewide study conducted by Smart Start, which was a survey of transition practices, and also surveyed over 100 preschool coordinators in the LEAs. So for phase 2 of the pilot in 2018-19, we conducted a survey of all of the NC pre-K contracting agencies to kind of get an idea of who might be interested in joining this pilot program. We had 31 counties respond with interest, and 16 additional counties were selected. And we also expanded participation to include one Head Start classroom in each participating county. So in addition to the private childcare setting and the public school setting. During the second phase, we asked, once again, the pre-K teachers to complete a child information form using their observational assessment data and to share that information with families. We again provided teachers with the All About Me forms to share with families and asked them to provide that and to request that the families deliver that to the children's kindergarten teachers. And we also engaged the local leadership teams and provided support for these teams to create and further develop their community transition plans. In 2019, DHHS was awarded the Preschool Development Grant, as you probably know, and this funding allowed DHHS to hire a full-time transition coordinator to support the pilot. It also allowed to support funding to support training for pre-K and kindergarten teachers in the pilot counties, and has allowed DHHS to provide Teaching Strategies Gold and a suite of curriculum resources to all NC pre-K classrooms, which will facilitate data sharing between pre-K and kindergarten. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few slides. In 2019-20, we began to focus with pilot counties on training for administrators and community leaders and the development of local scale-up plans. So they had begun with, the initial counties began with 2 classrooms. We added a third with the Head Start, and we wanted them to develop a plan to scale this up to all pre-K in the county. However, the pandemic hit, and as with many things, the transition to kindergarten pilot activities were put on hold. But we emerged and or reemerged, and in 2021, in November 2020, the state leadership team reconvened to resume our planning. And additionally, in April of last year, we hosted a joint meeting between NC pre-K and kindergarten teachers, where they heard a panel of NC pre-K teachers discuss transition successes and challenges that they experienced during the pandemic. And then over the summer of last year, DPI entered into a third-party contract with DHHS and Teaching Strategies to add an additional 900 plus public school pre-kindergarten classrooms to the Teaching Strategies contract with DHHS, which has allowed DPI to provide Teaching Strategies Gold, the assessment, to classrooms that are not funded through NC Pre-K, so that all pre-K classrooms at the public schools have access to that assessment. While not part of the transition to kindergarten pilot, something else that occurred during the 2021 school year that benefits the transition work that we're doing is the update of the state's kindergarten entry assessment, which is now referred to the North Carolina Early Learning Inventory, as part of a continuous improvement process. And in response to input and feedback that we received from stakeholders, the KEA was revised to include out-of-the-box Teaching Strategies Gold assessment content, as well as many other resources that teachers and administrators had requested, such as additional reporting, curriculum materials, online training, etc. Kindergarten teachers now are assessing children at the beginning of kindergarten year with a subset of the same teaching strategies, objectives, and dimensions that are assessed in pre-K. So next steps. DCD and DPEI are currently working with Teaching Strategies to create a transition report. And that transition report will be transferred from the Teaching Strategies Gold Preschool pre-K assessment license to the Teaching Strategies Gold DPI Early Learning Inventory license in the fall. And so once that data transfer occurs, kindergarten teachers will be able to log into their NCEI account and then generate a transition report within the NCEI platform for each child that was served in NC Pre-K, and every child served in pre-K classrooms located in the public schools. We will also be implementing an SEL, a social emotional learning pilot, in NC Pre-K classrooms in both public and private sites. And additionally, DPI has received some funding to begin piloting and implementing the pyramid model in a small number of kindergarten classrooms. We are currently working and in conversation with the TA Center at Vanderbilt University as they've been working to adapt that model for appropriate use in kindergarten classrooms. Additionally, we will be working to implement the recommendations from the B3 Interagency Council's Transition and Continuity Work Group, including strengthening state policies to create a shared responsibility for local transition planning and revising the state's early learning and development standards. And there's more on that a little bit later. I think I saw a question pop up, Carla, about, let's see, will the transition report replace the child development information form that we have used in the past? Yes.
I'm responding, Dan, yes.
Oh, are you? Okay. All
Yes.
right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. And I think I turn it back over to you, Carla.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Dan, for sharing
Sure
the
thing.
details. Yeah, and that huge focus. North Carolina certainly had such an amazing focus on this area of transition. Thus, again, the reason for us coming together and focusing on transition. And also, we want to spend a few minutes talking about the ESSA work that's happened over the last few years and the opportunities provided via ESSA to support the birth to 8 alignment and improving outcomes for young children. So ESSA can certainly be used as a lever as we think about those opportunities. And when we think back to the changes in 2016 with ESSA, is the biggest shift is it really gives more flexibility back to states as well as to LEAs and districts, which is such an opportunity to think about how we can better serve young children and their families. Particularly, there is a specific focus on transition. Again, another reason for coming together as partners at the state level and supporting you all at the local level. And thinking about the partnerships and the MOUs between LEAs and Head Start programs, as well as other early learning partners. So why the birth to 8 piece? So I know I am preaching to the choir here, but you all know that is the most rapid period of development, and that end of 3rd grade really predicts later achievement and success in life. So huge areas of focus. And thinking back over the past, as we mentioned earlier, many of you have been meeting and having a focus and participated in meetings that we had around ESSA several years ago. So I'm going to give a little bit of that history and information just as a reminder. So when ESSA came about and the changes were there, and thinking about the awareness piece and making sure our partners really could think about this in terms of opportunities, it was a partnership that started between the Department of Public Instruction with Title I, Head Start State Collaboration Office, the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation, as well as Education Council, and having that support was just phenomenal. But thinking about how to move forward, how do we really think about LEAs and bring them to the table and make sure that the other partners are there? And how do we bring the resources and make sure that we are collaborating in a way that benefits children and families? So to begin with, along with that awareness piece, we decided to have some regional meetings across the state. And we ask that you come to those meetings and bring your teams, similar to today. And at that time, it was face-to-face, so there was more of a limited number. We asked for superintendents or designees, federal program directors. We asked for Smart Start, Head Start, and then there were a couple of spaces for you to decide who you wanted to bring, because we recognize that at the local level, you might have some unique partners that you want to bring or specific ones to include. So when we did that, we brought you together face-to-face. We had conversations about requirements and opportunities. We presented your local data, gave you time to talk about that. Again, we heard that you really appreciated that intentional time to look at the data, to have time to have conversations and decide on next steps. We asked you to leave that meeting with some commitments, which you did. And then we thought, okay, so these regional meetings were great and we're kind of done. But then we heard from you, no, we want to do this again. We want to have more time to meet with our partners. That's intentional and thinking about our data and what our needs are. So we had a second set of regional meetings where we again focused on the requirements as well as the opportunities. We again looked at the data, which is so important. And then we thought about strategic planning and focused on that particular area. So thinking about how all of your programs have to do strategic planning, we thought, wouldn't it be amazing if we could focus on how to work together and have one strategic plan? So very similar to what we're trying to accomplish today, in that we know that you all have a focus on transition plans and what would happen if you all work together to have a community transition plan. So again, working smarter and not harder. You'll also see on the slide that we had a focus of 3 areas: PD, family engagement, and transition. Many of you chose transition. So again, that helped us decide that this was definitely the focus of where we should be for this particular meeting. We continue to provide ongoing support for folks and teams at the local level, helping them as they thought about who should be at the table and what next steps would be in terms of meetings. We also developed some recommendations for districts to consider. So the LEA is responsible for submitting the local ESSA plan into an electronic system called CCIP at the Department of Public Instruction. That's typically federal program director that submits. And so thinking about, hopefully that plan is developed with partners and thinking about that data. And we went down every single question in that plan, and we included information about how to support the B3 continuum. So many of you looked at that and included ways within your plan. So continue to think about that in the future. We also developed LEA Head Start coordination guidance. So that's a requirement that LEAs and Head Start programs have MOUs. So to think about that kind of outside the box a little bit, not as a template, that was very intentional, but really wanted you to focus on relationships and what fit into the plan that was best for your particular community. And then thinking about, what does that guidance look like and how can we support you, as well as including additional early learning partners. So there's a link on the screen at Build a Foundation. You should be able to go to that site and click on initiatives and ESSA and see all the work that occurred and all the examples, the webinars, the PowerPoints, and resources that should help you in that work. So just to focus on that for just a second, again, the ESSA and the transition piece and the requirements. And on the right side of the screen, you'll see a box that includes the actual requirements. Again, we want people to think about more things than's listed there, but also just see that intentional focus on transition and how we are supposed to work together with our partners as requirements, which also lends itself to so many opportunities. So we're excited, again, about you being here today and building upon the work that we've done in the past via ESSA, as well as the NC Pre-KK transition teams. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Christy for requirements and opportunities.
Thanks, Carla. So now that you've heard the history and really understand our purpose for pulling you back together, we thought it would be interesting to really talk about some of the opportunities from the federal perspective, and then look at other opportunities at the state level. So I am going to turn it over to Ellie. I believe she has joined us now, and she is going to talk about transition opportunities and policy and maybe federal funding as well. So Ellie, take it away.
Thank you. Yes, I was able. Sorry, I joined a little late today, but it's great to be here with you all. My name is Ellie Cash, and I work alongside John Pruitt at Education Council on our early childhood team. I'm starting today to talk about federal policy and programs that will help the transition. And I wanted to highlight a resource that we created with another organization here in DC called New America, and that's a Transitions Toolkit. It does a really good job at highlighting specific scenarios that can help you respond to COVID-19. And create the structure to help assess your current systems, what you already have in place, how you can build those systems to be more successful, address who you have at the table and who might not be, as well as a great list of local level policy opportunities. So there's steps to strengthen transitions. And what I'll spend a lot of my time talking about today are the funding streams to support transition, that last piece. So the helpful framing for this is, as you are thinking in recovery mode, you're all already here. We know that you're ready for some new ideas. Think about how you might be able to open doors in new ways as COVID is consistently changing how we operate our schools and our early childhood spaces. So on the next slide, you'll see that I wrote at the top, the key is flexibility. And that's a main takeaway that we want you to get from here, as Carla alluded to earlier, just that it gives a lot of control over to folks who receive the funding as to how they view it. And you'll notice here on the ESSA piece how broad they are. And the advantage there is that the opportunity makes it as applicable as possible to what your community needs and what folks are sharing. So as you're meeting with educators, school leaders, childcare facilities, what are they saying they need? And do they need to meet with folks in the field for joint professional development? Do they need to focus funding on bringing in more families? As ESSA acts as a lever for transitions, transferring information is part of those requirements. But how can you get creative with that? How can you make sure that information lands in the right hands in an accessible format? How can you make it more systematic, more smooth? Use these, frame these as questions and not just as requirements to help folks who are doing really challenging work of bringing children back into academic spaces and learning spaces when they're unfamiliar spaces to them prior. And we are meeting with a lot of teachers in recent weeks, and they are noting just how strong those challenges are. The next piece is CCDBG, which is the Child Care and Development Block Grant. This list is a little shorter, and that's because the opportunities that are in CCDBG significantly overlap with how you can use ESSA funding. So the first item on my list is high quality systems planning. Well, that could mean a lot of things, right? It could mean sharing data, family engagement, joint professional development. But again, assess what your community needs. Have these conversations when we go into our small group breakouts as to how to coordinate these spaces, connecting pre-K spaces with educators and with the schools, connecting family with schools. How can you do that? What additional training are teachers saying that they need? So be listening to those and know how flexible this funding is to do that. The next slide talks about the policy opportunities that comes with these federal programs. The first one is, as you've heard, aligning routines and behaviors. When we talk to school leaders, when we talk to pre-K educators as well, everyone's doing their best, but people want more information on what exactly that looks like at specific schools and in specific districts. So here is a list of funding that you can pool to use on that. That's ESSA, CCDBG again, Head Start funding, IDEA, and the last one's especially important because it has an expiration date, the American Rescue Plan funding. Locations and across the country, schools and systems are having trouble getting that out the door. Well, now you have some ideas as to how you might use it. The next one is on family engagement. Again, you really have to think outside the box, outside what you currently do, and get creative to reach those families greatest or furthest from opportunity. Again, ESSA as well as American Rescue Plan funding can be used for that. The last abbreviation is for home visiting programs. How can you identify families that need more connection to the educational space, identify them, and use funding to pay teachers and educators to go and meet with them? My third piece is bringing more folks into the classroom. Make them trained in the early childhood space and the needs of younger students, because we know that the pandemic has delayed a lot of cognitive development for students, unfortunately. Again, American Rescue Plan ESSER funds can be used for that. Even bring it into the first grade classroom as well, as you see on the list. And then the last piece is how can childcare providers, again, really getting creative with maybe new curriculum that better aligns to the expectations and kindergarten readiness pieces. One thing that's not on this list that I will add is as you think about transition planning and re-upping this, if you had to put it on pause during COVID, how can you create a transition plan using, again, the needs of your community? All of the funding, the federal funding programs can support making that transition plan happen. So I wanted to add that last piece, and I will turn it back over to Christy. Thanks.
Thanks, Ellie. And you would think after 2 years of using Zoom, I would be able to unmute myself, but sometimes it takes a little longer. So we want to continue this discussion by thinking about state level opportunities and funding streams, and also requirements around transition. And I'm going to start this, but then ask Dan to assist me in some of these conversations. But as we've already talked to you about, the Session Law 216-94, which was the legislation that was passed that asked us to begin to look at NC pre-K, child-specific data, and share that with our kindergarten teachers. So that's one requirement that we have in state legislation that really helps to push this idea that we need to have a community transition plan. Next slide. And Dan, I'm going to turn this back to you to talk about some more recent legislation that really re-emphasizes the need for transition plans.
So during this legislative session, the Excellent Public Schools Act was updated, and in that legislation, there's a requirement for sharing pre-K assessment data with kindergarten teachers, particularly the end of year checkpoint data is what that would look like with kindergarten teachers. So then we've already talked a little bit about the transition reports that will be generated and shared. So we're on track for meeting that requirement. Additionally, the law requires that all pre-K through 5th grade teachers, NC pre-K, and then other public school pre-K participate in LETRS training, which is a literacy training for educators. And so that's going to, over time bring alignment between pre-K and kindergarten with regards to literacy practices. Additionally, with the Leandro plan, with the Leandro case, I'm assuming, within the Leandro plan, there is provisions for ensuring that there's smooth transitions, not just from early childhood into kindergarten, but also from kindergarten to first, and first to second, and second to third. And One of the goals, however, under that is that all children transitioning from NC pre-K into kindergarten, that they will have a comprehensive transition plan that's developed amongst early childhood providers, public schools, as well as families and kindergarten teachers. The State Board of Education's strategic plan also includes an outcome under Goal 1 that talks about and speaks to the quality of transitions from pre-K into K-3 classrooms, so really all the way through 3rd grade, thinking about not just the transition like the event, if you will, but also the alignment and continuity between each year for children. And one of the activities under that is to implement a pre-K to K transition pilot program. So with this, the State Board of Education, puts its support behind these efforts.
And I'll jump back in, Dan.
Right.
In addition to the state board, the Division of Child Development operates the North Carolina NC Pre-K program. And there is a requirement in our guidelines and requirements around creating a transition plan for children who are transitioning into the NC Pre-K program, as well as out of the NC Pre-K program to kindergarten. Additionally, the division has the preschool development grant that we talked about that allowed us to hire a transition coordinator to really continue this work, and also provide funding to create a data platform that we will be able to share child-specific data on. But also, as part of the preschool development grant, we were able to build on the early childhood action plan of the state and create a strategic plan for birth through 5. And as one of the goals, there is a strategy around transitions, not just pre-K to K, but also transitions across the birth through 8-year-old continuum. So there's also a team called the Birth through 3rd Grade Interagency Council. One of the work groups under this council is around transitions and continuity. And again, their work is around shared responsibility and alignment and continuity. And all of the areas that we just talked about at the state level aligns very, very nicely with the work of this committee. So what we would like to do now is transition into our first breakout session after our friends from Education Council shares a little bit of information. We're going to talk about the data and where are our children that we've been talking about that are transitioning. So I'm going to turn it over to John to lead this part of the discussion.
Thanks, Christy. Happy to be here to share this information today. As we were planning this work, we really thought it might be interesting to look at enrollment trends across public schools, both at the national level and in North Carolina, to understand the impact of COVID-19 on public school enrollment and where children are or may be, and how that might impact transition practices going forward. So if you look at this first slide, you can see in the 2020-21 year, when the pandemic was probably at its peak, you can see that across all grades in public schools, there was a 3% decrease in enrollment for that school year. And that really marked the largest decline since the start of the century, since the year 2000. In fact, public school enrollment had been increasing each year by a fairly significant clip until 2020 with this decline. As you could expect, the largest decrease happened in pre-kindergarten with a 22% reduction in pre-kindergarten enrollment nationally, and a 9 percentage point reduction in kindergarten. When you put those two together as a grade grouping, it represented a 13 percentage point decrease. By comparison, grades 1 through 3 only saw a 3% decrease in enrollment. Excuse me, grades 1 through 8. When you think about children not enrolling in public schools, where have they gone? Where are they? Nationally, looking at data from the National Association of Independent Schools, the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools, and the Census Household Pulse Survey, you can see a significant increase in student enrollment occurring in the pandemic year in the private school space, the charter school space, and while smaller, a still significant increase in homeschooling, 3 percentage points. Looking at North Carolina, what I decided to do was look at data across multiple years to get a sense of what enrollment has looked like and what trends have developed. Using the 2018-19 school year as a baseline, you can see that basically 112,538 students were enrolled in public school kindergarten classrooms in the state of North Carolina. And then mirroring that trend of enrollment increases that was happening up until the pandemic, you see an increase of 1.5% in the following year, 1920, jumping to a little over 114,000 students. As you can imagine, there was a significant decrease to kindergarten enrollment in the pandemic year, 99,000 students, a drop of 13 percentage points. But in this year, looking at first month data, there's been a rebound, which we're seeing nationally as well, about 11 percentage points in North Carolina, jumping public kindergarten enrollment up to close to 110,000 students. But still note that when you look back at 1920, it is short of that particular number of 114,000 students. So students are somewhere else, or missing enrollment is down in public school kindergarten. Where have they gone? Looking across data sources that were available in the Division of Non-Public Education in the Department of Administration in North Carolina, across those same years, looking at homeschool enrollment for grade 1, they don't record homeschool enrollment for kindergarten. They start with grade 1. You can see that there was an increase in homeschool enrollment beginning in the 1920 school year, and then that significant jump that happened in the 2021 school year while the pandemic was raging, almost 30 percentage points, close to 5,000 students. Next slide. Private school enrollment, when you look at kindergarten enrollment, using data from the Division of Non-Public Education, you see an increase of 10 percentage points or 11 percentage points practically in private school enrollment for kindergarten in the 2020-21 school year. The same is true for grade 1. In 1920, there was a slight increase. In the 2020-21 school year, it jumped by almost 8 percentage points. So what does that mean for us moving forward? I think it's important to understand that public school enrollment is expected to rebound going forward. Yet we see from preliminary numbers, there's still a 2.2% reduction in K-12 enrollment from 2018-19 to today. And that may lead to a potential impact on funding long-term. As you know, funding for public schools is determined by average daily membership, or basically the number of students that are in the classroom. With a reduction in the number of students in the classroom, that translates into a reduction in funding long-term. Learning lag is significant, particularly for students of color. It's another trend that we're seeing both nationally and in the state of North Carolina. We're also recognizing the increased fragility of children as they enter kindergarten. Students are showing up with more and stronger social emotional needs is one particular area that we hear about quite often. And then looking at end of grade test scores, it's clear that that learning lag is consistent across states and communities in the country. And as I mentioned, particularly for students of color. So how quickly can we accelerate learning? That remains a gray area. If we look back to the Great Recession of 2008, where education funding was significantly reduced, and it had a negative impact on learning for students, it's taken practically a decade to make up for that loss of learning or that lag that occurred during the Great Recession. So we can expect a similar trend. Catching students up is going to take some time and some significant effort. And then finally, I wanted to share this statistic that came from a survey that speaks to public trust in teachers and the fact that it's declined by 6 percentage points since 2019. And while public education and school teaching is still the 4th most trusted profession in the United States, a decline by 6 percentage points does speak to an erosion of trust. And I want us to think about what may be the reasons for that, but how we might leverage the transition process to begin to re-engage families in meaningful ways and start to build that trust going forward. So as we go into our breakout groups through the magic of Zoom, I want you to think about the context that was presented here earlier today with the knowledge that data will be transferring from pre-kindergarten classrooms, NC pre-K classrooms, following those students into kindergarten. How can this information best be used to inform instruction to support children's growth and development, particularly in the social emotional domain? How can we use that information to begin to build trusting relationships with parents and families, and better engage parents and families in the education of their children in meaningful ways? I think we all know of the importance of meaningful family engagement. And I would just point to a recent Brookings Institute report that speaks to schools with successful family engagement strategies in place are 10 times more likely to improve student outcomes than those that do not. So as we move into our groups, consider these questions. And when we come back, I'm going to ask for people to report out something that may have been a highlight in their conversations. Carla, I think we probably have about, you tell me, 7 to 8, 10 minutes.
I think if we can do about 7, that'd be great.
Great. So we'll come back, have a short reporting time, and go from there.
Yeah, so Tina is our IT expert that will place you into groups. We're doing that by registration list. So if you register with your team, you'll be with those. If there are some of you that didn't have a team, we put you in a group together. We will have facilitators for the second breakout session, but not for this session. And there will be some state level folks that may just want to listen to your conversations. So we're going to head to those breakout rooms now, take a screenshot of what you see in terms of what to discuss, and that'll also be in the chat box. So we'll spend about 7 minutes in breakouts and come back.
It's good to see so many faces. If I could just ask, is there anyone who would be willing to share any comment or highlight that came forward from their group discussion, as brief as that discussion may have been? So it looks like I see Stevie Alverson has her hand up. I'll call on Stevie.
Yeah, I'm reporting out because I think I spoke almost the entire time our group met. And so I felt really bad. And they're like, well, you should share for the team. So I was just saying, I'm speaking from Buncombe County, Asheville area. And we've been having a lot of meetings with various stakeholders in our area that are really productive and awesome. But I was just thinking about the way this data could apply to the next meetings that we have, and just thinking about, to me, my personal reaction to the data is like, oh my gosh, it scares me. I feel like there's this impulse to think that this is, oh no, there's a bigger fracture in public trust of the public school systems. So just thinking about how, to me, that signifies that we really need more parent representatives in our local teams and committees when we have these discussions, because we're making decisions, I think oftentimes unintentionally, we're making decisions without them. And so I think that data really kind of like is jarring to me in that way. And I don't see that as something negative. I see it as an opportunity for us to invite more voices to our committees.
I really appreciate that comment. And this is the 8th of the meetings that we've had, and you were the first group to come forward with that observation. So hats off to you. I think that was for me, a drop the mic moment. I won't ask anyone else to share, because I think, the takeaway is perfect. Making decisions for others without their input is not often the best path to go. And so I think as you think about involving parents, both in your planning committees, you're going to understand better how to involve them in a meaningful way in the transition process and in the education of their young children, and overall just rebuilding that trust that's necessary for positive school. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you. I would just also mention before we transition out of this particular piece, the data transfer that's happening is specific to children served in NC Pre-K. I know that in time that will probably evolve to children that are in the private sector as well. But don't forget about and know that there are children that are coming into kindergarten. You know this. Children that are coming into kindergarten, transitioning in, that are not in pre-kindergarten services and not being served in the private sector, and that are based at home, and during the pandemic may really be living outside of the system totally. So think about, in your transition conversations, how to reach out, find those children and support them as you move forward. So I really appreciate your time today. And with that, I will stop and turn it back over to Carla. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, John. We are going to move on now to an exciting part of our meeting. And we're going to have the amazing Muffy Grant, who is an expert facilitator, help us with our expert panel from Buncombe and Transylvania. So over to you, Muffy.
Thanks again, Carla, for that gracious intro. I always feel like it's a height to fall, the buildup. We're thrilled to have Buncombe and Transylvania joining us today. And I would ask that those who are going to speak on behalf of both of those counties, if they would come off mute and introduce themselves to the group. Buncombe.
I'm Stevie Alverson. I just spoke to you all, but hello again. I'm from Buncombe County. I work for Buncombe Partnership for Children as an early childhood program consultant, and I represent our ESSA team, and I'm also on our kindergarten readiness committee, kind of with the hat of, I do a lot of the Ready for Kindergarten, is what we call it, events for Buncombe County.
Terrific. Great, Stevie. And Transylvania County?
Hi, this is Rebecca Snur. I'm with Smart Start of Transylvania County. I am a program support specialist. We are the contract administrators for our local NC Pre-K program. And I also work on several committees for kindergarten readiness and transition, and sort of everything we do in our county is definitely a partnership. So I partner on all of the events and things that we do to prepare for kindergarten.
Terrific. Well, we're so fortunate to have both you, Stevie, and Rebecca with us today to speak to all the good work that's happening in your respective counties. And I'm so glad, Stevie, that you are one of our expert panelists, because I'm just going to pick up where, with that real science you just dropped on us, and ask, how does your collaboration ensure children and families experience transitions in a positive way?
So Muffy, I did want to take a second to say that we do have one more representative here with me from Buncombe County. Carrie is with us, and I wanted to give her an opportunity to introduce herself, and then I'm happy to pitch in on this question as well.
Okay, great. Please.
Hi, I'm Carrie Bruns, just got married, sorry. I've been on the Buncombe Asheville City Committee for, well, since the start of this work. But I am here just to fill in because Stevie is, thank goodness, back with us. And so if she doesn't have the answers, then I'm filling in, but she's the one that's actually representing our fabulous team.
Well, excellent. And congratulations, Carrie.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, Stevie.
Thanks, Carrie. I had, like, when I saw your name pop up at certain things, I was like, who is that? I don't know who that is. And I was like, it's Carrie. So yeah, so Carrie's been, has been on the committee for a while. And I know I've recognized some other names that are on, have worked with us as well. So I would love if they feel the need to chime in too. But I think that, so our transition team is made up of Buncombe County and Asheville City. And the fun thing is, I think that I can't remember the exact year we started this, but it was a while ago. I started working with the partnership in like 2000 and I don't know, 13, something like that. And fairly soon after we started having these conversations, I was really excited because I felt like, again, I mentioned this before, the conversation about transitions to kindergarten. I feel like a lot of people were left out. And I had my own experience with my own child going to kindergarten. And I kept thinking, like, I have to get her ready for kindergarten. So I think that a big piece of the work that we've done that I'm really excited and proud about is that we've brought so many different voices to the table. And again, we still do, I think we do need more family representatives, but I think that having all those voices at the table to discuss what is kindergarten readiness. We don't really have a common definition for this in amongst our different school systems, and even from parent to teacher, teacher to teacher, or pre-K teacher to kindergarten teacher. So we started having those conversations, and then we started. So for me, I think the meetings and the team gave us that platform to just have that base conversation that was so important before we could even do any other work. So we meet once a month. And then we have a subcommittee, which is the Kindergarten Readiness Committee. And I left for a couple of years. I left the partnership to work for the University of Wisconsin. And when I came back 2 years later, the work had not only continued to go, but it was like growing. So it was so exciting to see that happening. So yeah, that's basically mostly what we're doing. And we just keep going.
That's great. Thank you. And Rebecca, what about in Transylvania? How are you ensuring that children and families experience their transitions in a positive way?
Well, we are just reigniting a formal committee. Initially, this pilot work was done by a group of people who are no longer with us or who have changed jobs, and many have actually left the industry, which I'm sure we've all seen a lot of. So what we did was we already had as a county some events and things in place to that we cobbled together basically with lack of a formal plan to approach kindergarten readiness. And one is the Kindergarten Readiness Rally, which is an in-person event for the first time in a couple of years now. So we're really excited to meet families in person and establish that bond and trust that we've been discussing. But last year, since we couldn't meet in person, we created a Kindergarten Readiness and Transition Toolkit. And our toolkit project is part of a larger collaborative in our county called Get Set Transylvania. We're partnered with Sesame Street and Communities. So we were able to fund and distribute to each enrollee in kindergarten one of these kits. And it involves resources about how to, start getting morning routine and lessening anxiety at separation. Some just basic skills about what you want to be able to do, what you want your child to be able to do when they enter kindergarten, and nothing like make them a child prodigy. Simple things like they need to put on their jacket and zip it up themselves, non-scary things. And then we paired that with a summer camp called Jumpstart to Kindergarten. And last year we just did the information sharing. We included NC pre-K, non-NC pre-K, and even unlicensed 4-year-old classrooms in this. And we just sort of picked it up. Audrey Renault with Transylvania County Schools made sure that the information got to the right teachers. And so our informal efforts are sort of forming what will be a formal plan. And we also, in our breakout session, realized the glaring absence of parents. So we're at the beginning of recreating this committee, but we desperately need and want their input.
That's so great. And Rebecca, you laid out the elephant in the room for everyone. The workforce, the early care and education workforce, was in a fragile state before the pandemic. And of course, all of the added pressures and the fact that so many of these folks were expected to come back to work and became sick themselves, were not afforded, mostly were not afforded any of the sort of safeties and insurances so that they could take days off. And many ended up leaving the field just because they were exhausted and so fatigued. So you mentioned cobbling things together yourself, but could you give us some concrete examples about how you were able to keep things going in this context?
Well, our executive director, Deb Tibbetts, always says our smallness is our greatness. And you have Buncombe and Transylvania County, which represent sort of the two types of just two very different counties in the Western region. Buncombe has Asheville, which is our big city, it's our metropolis, and Transylvania is much smaller. A lot of our population is here part-time during the summer. But all of the group that has worked on this, we work in so many other ways together. We're all at the NC Pre-K Advisory Committee meetings. We plan the kindergarten readiness rally. We partner on our kindergarten camp, which we have in our public schools and our local charter school now. So there was a natural expansion that happened just because we're small and we're constantly in contact. Whether it's with the teachers, site administrators, directors, we are that small. We all know each other. So it was very simple to say, we're going to send out these permission slips to families to sign to say that they'll share this information. And then it's just a personal phone call and an email to each director. And we had, I don't know, Audrey, if you remember how many people reported last year, but I think we had over 100 students, rising kindergartners, whose information was shared between preschool and kindergarten teachers. And that's a lot here.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great snapshot. And Stevie, how about in Buncombe?
So this is where it might be helpful for Carrie to speak up if she has something to add about things that happened in our absence. But I'm also primarily speaking from the early childhood perspective in terms of pre-K and under. We've had a lot of staff turnover. I mean, it's like the biggest challenge that we're working with right now, and just constantly working to just be a support system for educators that we're consulting with, or the directors that we're consulting with. So unfortunately, one of the challenges that I've seen come from that is that ready for kindergarten or kindergarten readiness sometimes kind of has taken a little bit of a back burner. And so that's been a little bit challenging with our work. Parents, I think families and parents have felt a little bit like in the lurch about what to do to get their children ready for kindergarten, because what's kindergarten going to be? Is it going to be on a computer? I don't know. So that's been a little bit challenging, but I think that in my understanding is in my absence, there was still a lot of work being done to address how do we continue to do that work and move that needle so that our kindergarten teachers feel ready to receive these pre-K kids who might not have actually had face-to-face pre-K. Carrie, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, one of the things that we've been doing with Buncombe and Asheville is trying to align our calendars together, because Dawn was in Asheville at the time, but we really wanted to have professional development with all of our pre-K and K teachers together. And we were able to have one, and then the pandemic hit. But we just wanted to have common language between the pre-K and K teachers, so they would understand the expectations of both grades. So I think that is still a challenge that we have as a team, is just trying to find the time where we can do a lot of the needed work between the two teachers.
That's great. And, you know, you touched on it a bit, Stevie, with kind of where you're coming back into the field and where the need is, and knowing what we know about brain science, you know, placing this expectation on pre-K teachers to successfully transition their kids into kindergarten. What we know about brain science is, you know, 85% of that's done birth to age 3. So what are your communities? And not only that, there's an entire population of children, exceptional children, that we haven't touched on here. So what transition services are in place in your communities for exceptional children and the birth to age 3 transitions? Rebecca, do you want to start us off?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We'll go small to large.
Yes, I'm happy to. I want to follow up on one thing, though, that Stevie said about the professional development. One of the things that came out last year, it didn't come out. Pardon me, I'm sorry, I'm talking too fast. I don't have a background in early childhood education. I'm a process person. So when we handed out the surveys to the pre-K teachers to share with the kindergarten teachers, the feedback I got is, you're speaking kindergarten language, not pre-K language. And so that is something that anyone who made that comment will be put on a subcommittee to mitigate that, hopefully before we hand them out this year, and bring those two together and just get the right people in the room who need to be guiding, you know, the language or the specifics of this information sharing. As far as getting information out to the public whose children are not engaged in any sort of formal care, we have, as I spoke about before, the Gets at Transylvania collaborative, and we use the library, or we have a family organization called the Family Place, and these folks work with, say, churches and community centers, and they do outreach to different communities, and we all cross promote. So we have an advantage there with access to as many families as possible. However, I just will say that even though there will be some children who never experience pre-K due to parent choice, we have a capacity shortage here that we would like to, you know, work on and improve so that we do have more room in care for families who would like their children to experience pre-K.
Stevie, do you feel well positioned to answer this one about 0 to 3 and exceptional children?
Yeah, I would say, to borrow the phrasing that was used before about a small and mighty team, we have a small and mighty team here in Buncombe County and Asheville City Schools. And one of the most exciting things, well, I keep saying one of the most exciting things, if you can tell, I get really excited about transition to kindergarten. A very exciting thing that's come from our work together is that we've done these, Carrie mentioned us having professional development where we've had pre-K and kindergarten teachers in the same room. Whereas before it was a little bit more fragmented. We didn't get that opportunity a lot. And I thought that in my position, I was hearing two people speak different languages, which was what I also heard. Like, you're talking kindergarten, you're talking pre-K. How do we get this collaboration? So I feel the same with exceptional children. I was hearing a lot like, hey, we're getting really quality information from Head Start or from Asheville City Schools preschool about kids coming into kindergarten, but there's some kids who either aren't in pre-K or they're in small private childcare centers that we don't have a lot of opportunities to get information on them before they're coming in. So this has been a big part of the work that we've been doing, and I really see an opportunity for growth here too. I think we could be doing a whole lot more, especially after seeing the data, thinking about Buncombe County right now, how many childcare centers have classrooms that are closed because they don't have enough staff to continue opening these classrooms. So where are those children? And what if those children are in need of those transitional supports and we don't know? So this is an opportunity for growth I see with our committees, but it is exciting to know we just had one of our in-person Ready for Kindergarten events, the first one we've had in a couple of years, like 3 weeks ago. And Brenda Little, who is one of those folks who helps with those transitional pieces for exceptional children, was saying, "Oh, I just caught 2 parents who said that they have children that need to be screened, and like, so we can get ready for them to come through." And we never would have caught them if I hadn't presented at this thing, you know, or maybe she would have caught them, but it would have been a lot more challenging. So it was just 2, but it was just the idea that like, hey, that's something we didn't have that last year.
Right.
So it's an opportunity for growth, but it's exciting nonetheless.
I have to say, you know, this is the last one of these. We ended these conversations in the western part of the state, and it's been so edifying to hear how many innovative ideas, and so different, and what a diverse state we live in. And so sadly, in the interest of time, we have to wrap this up, and we want to have more time for the small group discussions. But I have one, this is my rapid fire question, and you can either answer with a word or a few words. But I will start with you, Rebecca. Your work would not be successful without
Partners.
That's great. And Stevie?
I'll say my word that sounds strange, but I think it's dissonance. And a quick rapid fire answer is because if we were all on the same page about everything all the time, there would be no room for us to have these conversations and collaboration. So I think it's really important when we have that dissonance and we can say, well, from my perspective, and have that conversation and debate.
Well, Stevie wins the award for the first word on the last day of our meetings, the first time we heard dissonance. So I will send you some stickers and give you some snaps. Thank you both so much. This was a really robust and very, very interesting conversation. I'm going to turn it back over to my brilliant colleague, Carla.
Thank you so much, Muffy. You always have such a way to tie everything together and bring out some important points and strategies. So thank you to Buncombe and Transylvania for sharing your strategies and helping us really focus on how we need to make sure that families are at the table. And sometimes they are missing partners. That seems to be a theme that's been here today from John's conversation as well. So thank you for helping us realize and recognize that so that we can work on it and be better. Also in our communication and making sure we're speaking the same language and reconvening with our meetings and just working with our partners. So thank you again to Buncombe and Transylvania for an amazing opportunity to hear about your strategies and what's working. So now we're going to move on to a second breakout session, which we are very excited about and making sure that you guys are having the opportunity to meet with your team and to think about what we've shared today in terms of the data that John shared, and now as an opportunity to think about some questions and to really have the opportunity to think, to ponder. So the questions are there on your screen. What did you learn today that excites you? Hopefully you've heard some new information, some new ideas or strategies, or maybe some things that you've known about but haven't had a chance to really focus on and plan and implement in terms of your local needs. Also, as we think about the work that you've been doing, we've heard from you guys that some of you have been meeting and working. So what have you done that you're really proud of? And then also, what are some of the strategies? We've heard some of those things from our expert panel, and then also giving you the chance to have those conversations within your local community teams. In addition, what are some areas for coordination and collaboration? Again, that's been a huge focus of this work for several years in terms of our state collaboration and coordination and supporting you at the local level in terms of that collaboration. And then we also want to bring up this idea of the community transition plan. So if you haven't been part of a pilot and had a focus on that opportunity to develop a community transition plan, how might you do that? So you have all these requirements around your individual plans. How can you work together to have the community plan? So take a screenshot of those questions and or look for them in the chat box. We're going to have Tina, our IT expert, place you back into your groups. If you need to be moved to a different group, just let us know. I'm going to check the time. It's 2:36. We're going to come back at 2:50. So that gives you a good little chunk of time to have some conversations. And again, know that we're hoping this is just the beginning of your conversations and that you will continue to do this in your local team meetings. So we'll go ahead and place you into your groups. We also have amazing facilitators that have volunteered to help you through the conversation and to document your information. So they'll be joining you in your breakout groups. So again, we'll come back at 2:50.
Okay, I believe everybody is back or on the way back. So we just sort of want to wrap up this portion of our share by doing some group sharing. So Amy, I may just turn it over to you to start. Maybe your team could share just a little bit about what the discussion that was so exciting.
That's great. Yeah, I hit leave room instead of dismiss for the warning that we had a minute left and abruptly ended it for everyone in the middle of a great conversation. So apologies, team. We had folks from Henderson and Southwestern Development Commission on school age, which was so important. It was something I was going to say just as we zoomed out, which was I'm still waiting for that science that will show me that children stop learning at 3 o'clock, right? And they turn it on at 8, and that those key hours from 8 to 3 are learning times. I think before and after school and school age childcare is so critically important. So we had a great discussion, Henderson, Southwest Development, and Lincoln County, and folks shared what was so exciting about today is the getting back to normal, that we're stabilizing. It was energizing and exciting to hear from Transylvania. Some of us have idolized you and for the great work you're doing. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for the great information, likewise from Buncombe, also doing such great work. And it was nice to have that difference in size represented on that expert panel as well. Very exciting about kindergarten and pre-K and having TS Gold and knowing that they're going to be able to share, that you're able to get the data, have it put in a folder, and have the form, an All About Me form going to kindergarten teachers will be in the cumulative folders of children, a check off from parents allowing permission to share because that had been a challenge in the past, and very exciting as well. It felt like all 3 counties or both counties were saying we are seeing a lot of interest and investment in time and energy and interest in this from administrators, and that is also exciting. We're starting to be able to speak the same language, elevated that as well, how different the languages are of early childhood, of pre-K versus the K-12 system, and how we can start to speak the same language. How we thought it was maybe I'm a Rhode Islander, so I can say it a Rhode Island accent. When we started hearing Esser, those of us in early childhood, I went, what's Esser? Is that Essa with an R on the end? Like pasta for pasta, but in fact, just needed to be explained as an acronym. So I'll stop there, and anyone else in the group, please add in.
Thanks so much, Amy, for sharing. And it is exciting, the progress and the work that we've done in North Carolina. And I think I'm going to jump over to Jennifer Griffith. She has her hand raised. Jennifer.
Oh, I'm on. Okay. So yes, our group talked about they're out in the western part in Region A with 7 counties. So they have a challenge how to pull together, and they want to work through the Smart Start agency through Region A to come and network together. They've each been working on different facets of transition planning, and they want to pull together and network and brainstorm and see how they can share ideas and get a formal plan going that they can then take back to their counties. So it's great to see that representation. and also see that they are so excited about working together. So we had 3 counties represented today, 4 actually, 4. So one from the Silva Partnership was in one of our sessions. So it was great to see all the excitement and the enthusiasm that they're building towards their transition plan.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And Amy, I'm sure you'll take that back, that they want the partnerships to help engage and make sure. So she says she's got that on her radar. What a great next step to work with those 7 communities or those 7 counties in the far west. So thank you, Jennifer. And I believe real quickly, Tennille.
Sure. I just want to share on behalf of Randolph County. I think one of their biggest successes from just hearing their report out, they haven't missed a beat since COVID. They've been, one of their programs that continue to run the entire year. They've been able to continue to do in-person instruction all year, and they adapted really well to the COVID policies and guidelines to, ensure a safe environment. But some of the really cool things they share is their transition best practices that they've been able to, Rutherford, I'm so sorry, Rutherford County. I said Randolph. One of the things they've been able to continue doing is they have a Kinderpalooza, and they held it for the first time this year in person, where they allow elementary schools to come together and parents can meet with different school representatives and learn about their expectations for starting school. Each year they have meetings with their kindergarten principals and teachers, where they meet and learn, what information do they need, what information has been helpful last year, what do they need this year. It's kind of their continuous quality improvement around their partnership of sharing data. So, and then also they talked about field trips that they do. They take their kindergarten, their pre-KG preschool teachers on a field trip to their kindergarten schools to see what the life of a kindergartner is like. So they haven't really missed a beat. So it's really great to hear all the work they've been doing.
Well, congratulations to Rutherford County and all the great work. And I want an invitation to the Kinderpalooza. I think that will be so much fun. Lee, we are very short on time. Can you do it in 30 seconds?
I can do it in 30 seconds. I was with Buncombe County. They're expanding their committee all the time, their transition committee. They have county government involved, which may be another good funding source. And their city schools and county schools are now using the same curricula, and they're all using the grants, so they're getting more aligned.
Thank you so much. What wonderful stories and sharing out. Thank you all. Tennille just dropped in the chat box a benchmarks of quality, which is a tool that we used with our pilot communities for them to assess where they were according to the 5 best practices around transition that we had worked on in North Carolina. So please download all of the resources that have been added to the chat box as we've gone along. There's some great ones that we hope will help you in your work. We just want to, again, we have just a couple minutes. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing, continuing to do, have done, and are going to do. We will be following up with each of you as to where you are. Part of our work with our PDG grant is to spread our community transition plan work across our state and get community transition plans established. So we will be following up with you and the work. Thank you again for spending your afternoon with us. We know there wasn't enough time for you to get all of the work done that you needed to get done, but hopefully this is a good starting point. And we appreciate you spending the afternoon talking about such an important subject. So Carla, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Thank you so much, Christy. And Tennille is going to place the evaluation in the chat box. Please take a few minutes to complete that evaluation. We really do read those and use those to inform us in terms of planning future meetings. So again, we know that you wanted to have time to meet in breakout sessions during this particular meeting. So again, as Christy said, that's just the beginning, and we'll look forward to hearing about your future work. And we just want to have this reminder. You've heard us say throughout that we know that the focus on relationships are key, so very important to your partnerships. and also thinking about who's at the table, where the accountability is, including those families in an intentional way and being able to move forward. Because what we know is that you all are focused on providing the very best services for children and families in North Carolina. And we have really gone out with a bang with the Western region today and all of the strategies that you all have shared. So thank you so much for sharing the best practice pieces and helping each other to learn and grow. So on the screen, you'll see a list here of our statewide ESSA partners that's really worked hard to collaborate and coordinate. So thanks to that team for focusing on this particular topic and working on the agenda, as well as the statewide NC Pre-K to K transition team and all of the work there. A special thank you to our presenters from Dan at the Department of Public Instruction, and Dawn has helped with that as well. To John and Ellie from Education Council. We've been part of a multi-state convening in North Carolina for several years and feel just honored and privileged to continue to work with that particular organization. And Muffy from the North Carolina Early Childhood Foundation as a neutral partner that's always so supportive. So thank you again to our behind the scenes folks as well, all of our facilitators, to our IT folks, to Tina for helping us out, for Tennille and all of her support. The list goes on and on, lots of moving parts. So we know it's time to go. Thank you again for everyone and your support and sharing. And we will look forward to hearing from you via evaluation. So take care and continue that great work around transition.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.